Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're all doing great today. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Today, I'll be your host. My name is Imam Muhammad. I'm the founder here at Mahir Academy. And inshallah, today we'll be working together here on the topic which you've all seen earlier. I mentioned. So the topic is, learning the Quran. What should you learn first? What should you learn first when you learn the Quran? And this is something that a lot of parents out there, you listening to me. So learning the Quran. So what should you learn first? This is what we'll be talking about today. And so you might think that why are we having to talk about this and not actually just talking about reading tajweed and doing all those things. We've done all those classes before. We've done tajweed classes, we've done reading classes, and inshallah very soon we'll go back into those. And I love doing that actually. I love actually going through the Tajweed concept and practicing among all students. But we need to understand some mindset training. I used to tell parents, or I tell students that when you learn the Quran or when you're learning, so not all 100%, not all 100% of the time is for learning. Some of the time are actually used for mindset training. Some of the time are for mindset training, meaning you need to actually understand what you're learning and why you're actually learning them. You talk about the learning habit, you talk about the learning environment, you talk about stuff like that. And so these are things that actually added up, to learning the Quran. And so if you want to learn the Quran, uh, what should you learn first? What should you learn first when you learn the Quran? And some of you will ask me the question, which kind of question is this? I have seen is real time, and I've seen the effect of learning and the kind of learning student do in the first time. We all agree from maybe like 2 weeks ago, I talked about what skills do you need to build to be able to read the Quran yourself. What skills do you need to build? Uh, Mostly, I would say there are two ways people teach Quran these days. Okay. Some will have you, they recite the Quran to you, they recite it to you, and you recite after them, and that is pure memorization. But they will not tell the student that the student is actually memorizing. They'll say, recite after me, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and the student will say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So meaning the child is actually memorizing. But what should come first? So what's the pros and of starting with memorization first, and what is the cons of starting with memorization first? And I'll also talk about what is the pros and the cons of starting with reading fluency first. And so you can decide, on which one you should take first. I'm giving you all this so that I've seen a lot of different situation of kids, and I've seen a lot of results, different kind of results the student have when they learn the Quran. Okay, so let's talk about learning to read fluently. Okay, so you will decide which one you need to do first. So I'll talk about the pros and the cons of learning to read yourself. So what are the advantages? So when you learn to read the Quran and start learning to read, learning the letters, building the skills, what are the advantages of that? So why do you need to do that? What are the advantages of doing that? The advantage of one is when you learn to read the Quran and practice spelling, because there's a difference between reading fluency and memorization. Reading fluency is the ability to read any part of the Quran. So your ability as a student to read anywhere in the Quran. So you open the Quran and you can read, lay your hands on anything or on any ayah and actually read yourself. So that is reading fluency. And that's a skill which is totally different from memorization. Some people can actually read the Quran fluently, but they have not memorized the Quran. Okay. And so memorization is really understood, right? Memorizing meaning committing the ayat and the words of the Quran to heart and actually reading it without looking into the Quran. That is memorization. Okay. So I want to talk about the pros of learning to read any part of the Quran yourself as a beginner. So go back 2, 3 weeks ago, I talked about what do you need to build, like what do you need to learn, the things you need to learn. And inshallah, after I finish this series of mindset training, I'll go back into those tajweed concepts and we're going to be taking them one after the other again, inshallah. But when you learn to read yourself and be a fluent reciter, in Arabic, you learn to read the tajweed, and so meaning you are able to read any part of the Quran. The second advantage is that you are able to connect to the Quran. So you're able to connect to the Quran and see it, and you're not just reading, you're seeing it, and your eyes are seeing the ayat, and you're even able to do tadabbur as well. Okay, you are able to connect to the Quran. So one of the advantage of learning to be a fluent reciter, I've already made a distinction between fluency and memorization, right? So when you are able to read fluently, you are able to connect to the Quran. You are also able to read anywhere in the Quran yourself, anytime you want, anytime you want. Okay. The third thing is when you are able to read fluently, you avoid frustration with reading. Okay. Because when someone is not able to read themselves, they just listen to someone to recite to them, their frequency of reading the Quran is gonna be reduced. And also there will be a lot of frustration if they forget something someone has read to them, and they themselves cannot actually go into the Quran and read themselves. So that will bring a lot of frustration to that student, be it a child or an adult, right? So when you learn to be fluent yourself, you are able to read anywhere, you're able to connect to the Quran, right? You're able to avoid frustration when reading. And thirdly, you are able to earn to be among the Mahir bil Quran. So because there are two categories of those who read the Quran, those who are expert reciters who do not make mistakes, and those who make mistakes. So those who make mistakes and they are learning to be perfect, they get to the word. But those who are experts, if they die, they are going to be in the saf of the Malaika on the day of Qiyamah. Okay. They are reading with fluency and precision, right? So being able to read the Quran and reciting it fluently, it gives you those five benefits. One, I'm gonna repeat it again. One, you will be able to read anywhere in the Quran yourself, anytime you want, in Ramadan, anytime. Connecting to the Quran. So you connect with your mind and your tongue the same time to the Quran because you're seeing it before you can read it. Thirdly, when you are able to read fluently the Quran, you are able to avoid frustration. You're able to avoid frustration, like with reading. Sometimes when you're reading and you're getting stuck, it baffles your mind. It makes a student, if it's a little kid, they feel frustrated and leave the class, or they don't want to do it anymore, right? If you're able to read fluently as well, you are accorded, the status of al-mahir bil Quran, someone that is fluent and consistently reading fluently, and get the reward as well. What are the cons? Some of the disadvantages when you start to learn to read fluently first. One thing, there's no more disadvantage, but like one thing that I know is that you might find it hard in the beginning if you're starting to learn to read fluently because you need to learn a language as a whole or learn the reading as a whole, which will have a long-term benefit for you. So this is the only cons or disadvantage I see. When students start to learn to become fluent first, they have this initial pressure or obstacle, which is starting to learn a whole language, reading and entirely. They have to learn the rules of the tajweed, learn the compositions. And we in our program, alhamdulillah, we've actually have a way to actually put all those concepts of tajweed in a very simple language. So students who are joining our reading fluency program will actually not have that challenge whatsoever because all the concept of tajweed to help them become fluent Quran reciters, we've created a curriculum that's customized that's going to give you exactly what you need, without avoiding all the complexity of the jargons of the tajweed. The jargons, I mean, like the advanced, concepts that you think it's hard, you cannot understand this. We break those things into very simple languages. You can check my YouTube pages here, or you can check our YouTube. You see a lot of videos we've done about all the concept of tajweed. Go and check those and watch them, and you see what I'm saying about breaking tajweed concept into very simple language. So that's on the only cons I see when you start learning as a beginner, learning the tajweed. Those intricacies of the concept might be a bit challenging. But we've actually simplified that. So the second part, which is memorization. What are the advantages of memorizing the Quran the first time you learn to learn the Quran? Which is why a lot of people, parents actually, or students, or like the teachers, actually go ahead and they start with memorizing for the kids. So what they do is they will start teaching the kids and say, recite after me, or they have the child listen to a reciter, and the child is just basically memorizing like a rhyme, like a nursery rhyme. Okay, so it's making it easy for them because they don't have to pay too much concentration. They don't have to have any kind of like, too much connection. They just memorizing it. That's not passive, it's a passive learning. So they just listen and reciting after. So this is so easy for a lot of teachers. So it's easy for teachers to teach memorization than reading fluency. Okay. So because you just have to read and have the kid recite after you. Okay. The other advantage, will I say, people have in memorization is that you might see yourself or your child reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, oh, very quickly within a week. Or you might see your child reading Surah Al-Nas, oh, really very quickly within 2 weeks. But you see, they're actually reciting those surahs, right? They're able to read it. These are the two, advantages I see with starting with memorization first. But the cons which I see in when you start to learn the Quran and you start to memorize right from the beginning is that there's gonna be a disconnect, right? There's gonna be a disconnect between what the child is or the student is memorizing and the exact Quran text itself because they cannot read themselves. They're actually starting to memorize from the beginning. And so that's kind of be like the student is actually just reciting the student is just reciting what the teacher is reciting, and they themselves cannot actually read anything themselves. So that's really one of the challenge a lot of students will face when they're actually having to learn to memorize the Quran, memorize the Quran before they can start to read the Quran. Okay, so reading the Quran, of course, memorizing the Quran, they will have that challenge of disconnect, right? They're not able to see what they're reading, memorizing, and connect to the Quran. Secondly, as part of the cons of memorizing first, is that the kids might eventually lose all what they memorize, but they cannot go back to read the Quran. So if they grow up just memorizing few surahs, they only know those few surahs. Anything else in the Quran, they don't know it. Anything else in the Quran, they don't know it. I tell you, this is a big challenge, a really challenging part that a lot of parents will need to look into. So if you've seen your child learning the Quran for years and he's not seen any results, meaning you're not seeing them improving in their reading, you put the Quran before them, they still cannot read, is because of that. Because the kid is actually just memorizing all this while they've not actually learned the art of reading, or the student does not actually learn the art of reading. And those things they memorize with the teacher, they forget them if they stop revision for a while, and that's gone. But the only solution is for those kids to keep memorizing it all the time. Okay. With time, they can later be able to read the Quran, but it might take a while before they can be able to read the Quran. So, when the kids are starting to learn the Quran with memorization, I've told you about the advantages I see. One, the kids is able to start reading the Quran very quickly, right? They're able to read some surahs from their mouth to that, but also they are actually not having any stress learning the basics of tajweed, right? Because the teacher is actually reciting the tajweed to them right there. Okay. Uh, However, the cons is that we're based here in Canada, Dolly, right? We're based here in Canada. All our classes are in English, right? But when you have a student who is learning, right, and memorizing from the beginning, what happened is that they have this challenge of what disconnect. They're not connected to what they're actually reading. They're reading from the brain, but what they actually reading, they don't even know where it is in the Quran. And those kind of kids, it takes them forever before they can learn to read on their own because they only rely on the teacher all the time to read for them before they can memorize it. One, it's going to take a long time and it's going to be frustrating sometimes when they forget something, they have to wait for the teacher and they can lose those things anytime if they stop the classes, right? They can lose all those things they memorize, right? And also, of course, they're not connected to the Quran. And so you will see those two kind of learning style, learning to read fluently and memorizing. And so I want to show you something here. I used to tell parents when I actually, have to talk to people about, joining a program here and seeing how they can actually help the kids learn. And we do have a revolutionary program here that helps students learn to read the Quran in 4 months. People will say, how come that's possible? Yeah, it's possible. We have a system. I've talked about our learning habits previously in this talks. I've talked about learning habits. Learning habits is what makes students consistent in learning, the attendance, the homework, and all that. But when a child is learning the Quran and a parent is not able to decide how they will learn, many parents do not even know what to do first. Is it reading fluency or memorization? But you all will agree with me here. It's me personally, I prefer reading fluency first. Because when you have a child starting to memorize before they can actually read, it's like you're actually having a child to run before they can walk. Okay? It's like you're having a child to run before they can actually walk, right? So imagine you having your 5-year-old boy running, or sorry, your 2-year-old boy or your 1-year-old baby to run before they can actually walk. It's gonna be a really tough task for them. So a lot of memorization classes, if the kid is not able to read, and you see even today a lot of memorization programs here, even in Canada here or in the US, they want the kids to be able to read the Quran themselves first before they can take any student into memorization, because that's just the reality. A student who is memorizing the Quran without learning to read the Quran is gonna be a very big task. And what you will see at the end of the day, they're gonna drop out of the classes. They will not be interested anymore because they're frustrated, they're disconnected, there's no any connection. Okay. And also, if you want your child to be fluent and memorize the Quran, I find it a lot more easy. Just saying my own opinion based on what I've seen for the past 10 years in our program here. When a child is able to read fluently and able to read anywhere in the Quran themselves, or a student, the memorization becomes more easy at the end of the day. You know, if a parent want the kid to memorize the entire Quran, you want to try to get them to learn to read. Okay. Or some people do both at the same time. I don't recommend that. So let them read first. Let them learn to read themselves first. Once they can do that, then start to memorize the Quran. Of course, they can memorize some few surahs to pray salah. But we have this 4-month program. You see, it's not gonna take too long for them to learn to read with us in 4 months plus, and this is gonna get them read themselves. So once they finish doing the reading fluency program, I'll move them to start to memorize the Quran. I feel we've all understood, I actually, maybe I'm partial or not. I've tried to be balanced and talk about the pros and cons of both kind of learning. And so you need to determine which one do you need to do first, right? Which one do you want to do first? Which one do you think your child to do first? Do you want your child you want to have a short-lived feeling of your child reciting the Quran, memorizing some surahs, or do you want to have a long-lived feeling of your child ability to connect with the Quran? So if your child is memorizing first, they will have a short-lived, you will have a short-lived, and they also will have a short-lived memory of learning Quran, because they can only read some few surahs. You can say, oh, my child is using Fatiha, my child is reading Surah Al-Nas, my child is reading Surah Al-Falaq. Oh, that's so easy, right? But there's a disconnect between what they're actually memorizing and reading from their memory and what is in the Quran. They don't even know sometimes where the surah is, right? And this creates a lot of disconnect. And I've seen this a lot of time, does not help the child even become fluent, and does not even help them become Quran memorizers at the end of the day. Okay, so if you want to actually learn more about this and you want to see our accelerated Quran reading program works, you can comment below this video so we can reach out to you. And also, I'm gonna be sending a link into this chat. So if you want to join us in the program, or you want to see actually how the program works here, it's a 4-month program that we use to train students to become fluent Quran reciters. We do have these live sessions I do every Sundays as well. For those who are not willing to invest in Quran classes, we do have live sessions. We're going into Tajweed sessions in the next few weeks. So we are all going to be learning together, but it might not be as efficient as you having to be in a classroom, and we teach you and give you feedback, we give you homework, we give you, assessment, quizzes, and all those kind of things. So if you want to learn about our program and, see for yourself how the system works here that helps students learn to read in 4 months, without having you to waste a lot of time having your child in a program for 2 years, or you learning for 2 years, just you need to have a system that is structured that's going to give you results. I know a lot of people are hesitant sometimes to join Quran classes online and all that. But it's your own choice, and it depends on how actually you want this. So if you really want this and you want to get a result on time, I recommend you to actually try out any Quran class and see if they have a structure, right? They have a system that's going to help students. So they have a curriculum, they have a way to get a child, a student achieve results. Okay. And they've had, proof of that over the years, right? We've done this for almost 5 years, and I can show you a bunch of students in our program, but I'm not willing here to actually share any students of ours with you all here. So if you join us, if you join me, so you can book one of our parent demo session to actually join us and actually come to see how our program works and the way we actually teach in our program, inshallah. So I'm going to be stopping here. This is just a session I decided to actually bring up to give everyone insight of the difference between memorization and reading fluency. And so next time you're having your child or you want to start to learn the Quran, you need to make an informed decision of which one do you want to start first, okay? Do you want to start memorization first, or you want to be a fluent Quran reciter first? Right? Do you want to be a fluent reciter first so they can read anything in the Quran and connect to the Quran and have the ability to avoid frustration learning the Quran and all those things? You want to be able to learn the Quran, really learning to read fluently, right? So if you are having to memorize the Quran, or your child is doing that from the beginning, then of course they might achieve a very immediate result of memorizing some short surahs. But in the long run, it will not be advantageous, meaning the child will be there. They're memorizing those surahs, mashallah, they're memorizing them, but there will be a disconnect between them and the Quran because they're actually not able to go into the Quran and see those ayats and actually pronounce them correctly. They don't know the tajweed. They only hear it from the teacher, and when the teacher is not there, they cannot actually learn. They cannot actually learn the Quran themselves, or they cannot actually read the Quran. I've seen parents say, "Oh, I want my child to actually be able to read the Quran, in Ramadan and do tilawah with me." So it's got to start from somewhere, right? So if your child is not even able to read right now, you've got to take action right now. I know we have a lot of Quran classes. There's a lot of Quran classes online, and parents have options of online or on-site, learning. Both are really good. But one thing you need to be aware of, you need to know what you actually want for your child in the beginning, and you have to be upfront to the teacher. I want my child to learn to read fluently first. Okay, if it is that what you want, you need to make sure there's a curriculum or a set of steps or thing they will do to get that achieved in a time frame that you can actually measure, get reports and all those things. So if you want to learn more about our reading fluency program, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be putting a link in the chat here, or you can reach out to us and we can get back to you about the program details, and you can join us in one of our upcoming parent demo session, inshallah, or you can comment below this and we can reach out to you, inshallah. I know I have a bunch of people. I have some of you all here listening to me or watching me. Let me know if you have questions. I have people on Instagram. I have some of you on YouTube watching me. Some of you in our Facebook group. We do also have a Facebook group, in our Mahir Academy community. Mashallah, if you're not in that community, search for it. Search for it on Facebook. It's called Mahir Academy Facebook community. So over the years, like we've recorded and did a lot of Quran Tajweed classes, live sessions, reading. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll be having those sessions starting very soon, inshallah. For some of you who are really excited to go back to classes and learn the Quran. So you'll be able to join me back every Sundays at 5 p.m. UK time, at 12 p.m. Eastern time to learn together, inshallah. It's your brother in Islam, Imam Muhammad Amin, and inshallah, I'll see you next week. We're talking about something more beautiful. And inshallah, by next month, we'll be starting to continue our tajweed journey, and we'll be taking each surah of the Quran and analyzing each of the concepts of the tajweed in there, inshallah. Yeah, inshallah, until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.